Good evening and welcome to Taking Stock. Now, the biggest crisis facing South Africa is unemployment. If people are unemployed, there are no jobs in a family. If there are no jobs in a family, there's no money in a family. If there's no money, families go to bed hungry. Families are then less productive at school the next day and are less productive in their attempts to find work. And society becomes dysfunctional as a result. And in many cases, that is the reason why South Africa is an incredibly tough place right now. About a year ago, Tashmia Ismail-Saville was given the job by President Cyril Ramaphosa of creating 1 million jobs in 3 years, a gargantuan task which she never really expected to match within those 3 years. But she has set up a program which is beginning to yield jobs. We're broadcasting from Tembisa, from one of the Yes for Youth hubs, which you'll get to have a look around in a little bit. But Tashmia Ismail, it's been really good to catch up with you this morning in Tembisa. Has the job been harder than you thought? I mean, the president said to you, I need you to create 1 million jobs. You went, okay, sure, no problem. And we're a year into the project, and you've got what, 11, 12, 13,000?
15,820.
Approximately. But it's pretty good going. But that's not nearly the rate at which to achieve the 1 million jobs. The 1 million jobs was a big, hairy, audacious goal, but it just goes to show just how hard and intractable this problem is of creating jobs.
Let's get the dates right. The president launched us in March, but the legislation that enabled Yes to roll only came out in October, late October. So Yes has started in November of 2018. We had the December break. So 15,820 jobs in just over 17 weeks is quite a good run rate.
It's like looking at a company that takes EBITDA rather than earnings per share, because you can take out all the bits of accounting that you don't like. But the point is that after hitting the ground in March last year, had to get the legislation through, really kicked off in October, getting those jobs done. You're still not at a run rate to get to 1 million in 3 years.
We aren't. But we do, if we're going to do this properly, facilities like we're in right now, the infrastructure that has a multiplier effect in a community is the way that we'll get the number in the longer term. So in the short term, it is going to be slow, but we've got to put the foundational, the building blocks in. Let's take this unit behind us, for example. Mm-hmm. This was the first hydroponics unit in Tembisa. We have an entrepreneur running it. He's learning how to grow and sell this crop, and he is going to be employing someone to assist him in the actual facility, in the packing, in the distribution. And this was just a tester. Downstairs, we have a facility that is 15 times the size of this. So we're replicating this model, and there will be 15 entrepreneurs that will come out of it.
We'll get down into the facility in a moment, but just in terms of broad brushstrokes, why is it so hard to create jobs? I mean, you would think you create an environment, you get some economic growth going, people start businesses, they need people to help them, they hire. That's a great textbook idea.
Yes.
In reality, though, it's considerably harder. Why is it so hard?
Because our past models were depending on our first economy to generate those jobs. And the first economy in South Africa is highly concentrated. It exists in a few centers that hog most of the country's resources, but also generate a lot of the resources. They're digitizing the number of jobs they can offer. They're disintermediating at C-suite level. So entry-level workers, which is the country's real unemployment problem, 7 out of 10 people in this community outside this door are unemployed. Many of them don't even have a matric certificate, let alone tertiary. So there isn't space in the first economy for that level of skill. And what's happening in a space like this is because they've been denied the infrastructure, been denied the technologies, and it hasn't filtered into this market. So there's no trickle-down economics working here. Because this hasn't filtered into the market, the businesses here aren't competitive enough to scale and to employ more people. So we've disconnected economic growth from employment.
Yeah.
I do think that they will converge, but that's going to be at much higher levels of GDP. So maybe over 6% we'll start to see the jobs numbers increasing. Where we're at now, the little bits of economic growth that we have are not translating into jobs. And that's what's so sticky, is the people who are out of work are not matched to any opportunities that you really see available in market. And so the task is not just to create jobs, it's how do you create the places and the spaces for new jobs that have legs as we move into this 4IR reality. But there is hope in the story, because at the same time that we do see 4IR disintermediating accountants and tech people in Sandton, and we've seen the numbers, we've all read the headlines.
You've seen the empty office spaces in Sandton.
We've seen the empty office spaces, but we've also read the headlines on the shedding. This also changes the opportunities for people in communities like this to connect into markets, to develop the access they didn't have before. And this access is access to information, which is power in terms of how they run their businesses, where they can get stock, how they build inventories. It also teaches people in a whole new way. So you don't have to go to bricks and mortar facilities to be able to learn.
What does it cost to create a job? I mean, you've got a facility, and we'll talk about the facility and take a walk around the facility and get a good sense of it. But there's an economic cost to creating a job. In an environment where jobs are not created naturally via natural processes of old-fashioned economics, you've now got to spend money to create the space, to create the training, to then create the job, to send the person out into market, and finally when they get there, they may or may not succeed and may or may not employ other people. What does it cost to make a job?
So there's the type of job. We could do very basic, we will pay you to dig a ditch and fill it up, and it's not a sustainable job. Or we can do a slightly more expensive job where you put the technologies and the training around that job, and that person has greater longevity. They're more likely to open up an enterprise. They're more likely to employ more people. So in the long run, the more expensive job is going to give us back more.
And potentially has the multiplier effect.
It has the multiplier.
If somebody learns a real skill and goes through a program, could be a year, could be 2, could be 3 years, Clothing Bank does a 3-year program. If you create an environment in which somebody is empowered to create opportunities for others, that becomes, theoretically anyway, the silver bullet. We haven't seen the proof yet.
Well, I mean, we have anecdotally. So I'll steal a story from one of my coaches, Stephen Kosov. He loves putting people into chef school because there's such a high absorption rate once you have chef training. He put someone into the Elangeni where the internship was happening, and the guy was learning all sorts of pastry making. At night, he was an entrepreneurial character, had only been in the program for a couple of months, but was baking cupcakes at night to sell. The cupcake business became so lucrative, he employed 11 of his family members, dropped out of the internship program, but it was worth it. Those few months that he'd learned those skills gave him a really viable business. So those are real stories, and we see it happening all the time. People who drop out of programs, have learned a little bit of a skill, go off and start a successful business. So we need to rethink micro-credentialing. Do you really need 3 years to be able to learn a skill? The trick is going to be, how quickly do we get someone into an opportunity where they're earning an income, and do we match them correctly? Because if you've got the right person in the right job with a little bit of training, they do the rest themselves.
Tashmia Ismail-Saville is the head of the Yes campaign. We're in Tembisa. And in a moment, I want to take the cameras downstairs so that you can see the hydroponic facilities, so that you can see the mini fish farm that is here, and also have a look around a precinct for which she has some pretty big ambitions. And this isn't the only precinct of its kind in South Africa. More on that in a moment.